So I'm asking you, I'll tell you if you promise not to tell anybody else. And above everything else, don't tell anybody where you heard it. Is that a deal? Oh, the beginnings of a little bit of gossip. Yeah, that's what that is. A touch of slander is on its way. A betrayal of confidence. And both the speaker and the listener have a responsibility. We're going to find out today that the one who is tempted to speak a confidence has the responsibility to protect the confidence, not to tell what you promised not to tell. But the person who's on the receiving end of the gossip has equal responsibility to say, when approached like that, if you promise not to tell, I've got something to tell you, and don't tell anybody where you heard it. You have the responsibility of saying, time out. If you're not supposed to be telling it, and you don't want me to tell anybody, and especially you don't want me telling anybody who told me that, don't tell me. Both parties have equal responsibility. Now, James is one of the Bible writers who teaches us that the tongue, that little piece of flesh in our mouths, can be a powerful weapon. That the fires of hell sometimes find their way through the tongue. And that's especially true when we are telling tales about other people. So as we look at today's proverb, I want us to talk about the dangers of the tongue and the words of warning from the pen of the wise King Solomon about gossip and slander. So let's start out with a word of wisdom to the wise. Very simple. Beware of gossip. Beware of being a gossip. Let's make sure we understand each other. What is gossip anyway? Well, for our purposes today, it's someone talking behind someone else's back. And it is unflattering talk. It's talk that will make us look bad when somebody else finds out what we said. It's speech that we're going to regret voicing. It's something we're probably going to have to defend or apologize for. Gossip. Now, we don't mind when somebody's praising us behind our back. We like that. But we don't like it when somebody's talking bad about us behind our back. And it'll make us embarrassed when somebody finds out what we said about them. Now, we all know in principle that gossip is bad. None of us wants to be known as a gossip. But here's the problem. When people do it anyway, and we all fall prey to it in varying degrees at some points in our lives, and when the person about whom we said it finds out what we said about them, then we find ourselves scrambling. Now what do I do? Our options are pretty limited. Number one, we could deny that we said it, but we know that eventually it's going to be found out that we really did say it. Or we could go to the other extreme and double down and say, yes, I did say that and I mean it. But in most cases, we're not going to do either of those two. We're going to find ourselves ourselves somewhere in the middle, and we were going to try to explain it or to rationalize why we said what we said. And we'll say things like, well, yeah, I said it, but I really didn't mean any harm by it. It was an innocent mistake, a slip of the tongue. But no matter how you cut it, it gets us in trouble. That brings us to what the writer of Proverbs 12:18 says. The words of the reckless pierce like swords. And we've probably been on both ends of that sword. We've probably found ourselves on the handle end, and we have let our tongues slip, and we've said something about somebody else. We've gossiped, and we found out we cut somebody to the bone. And we maybe have found out people have done that to us. We've been on the other end of that sword. And it cut us to find out that somebody said something unkind about us. But look what it says in verse 18. The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. It reminds us, doesn't it, of what the Apostle Paul says in Colossians chapter 2, isn't it? About let our words be seasoned like as if with salt. In other words, use words that bring healing, not words that cut people. Gossip stirs up bitterness, anger, and strife between people. Proverbs 26:20 says, without wood, a fire goes out. Without a gossip, a quarrel or fight dies down. Word to the wise is, if you want to bring peace, watch your tongue. Watch your words. Without wood, a fire goes out. And that's where the listener to gossip comes in. Think of how many fires you can prevent by refusing to listen to somebody who approaches you and says, now, I'm not supposed to say this, but stop the process right there and you will put out fires. In fact, you will prevent fires from starting. Gossip stirs up bitterness and anger, and therefore it can also strain relationships. Proverbs 16:28 says, a perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. This is another effect of gossip. The point of all of these scriptures is this. We could avoid all of these problems the psalmist is talking about if we would just keep our mouths shut. So here's a word to the wise. Use caution when you say something bad about somebody. Use caution. This is true whether you say it behind the person's back or to their face. And Solomon even cautions us about speaking bad of people in a court of law. If you find yourself as a witness and you have to say something bad about a defendant, for example, use great caution as you speak the truth, which is saying something bad about the defendant, for example. Use caution. Now take, for example, our opinions about people. When we observe other people, which we always do, we're constantly observing people. And when we listen to what people say, and we're constantly bombarded with words people are saying to us, as we take in all of that through our eyes and our ears, we cannot help but make some judgments about that person. Good or bad. We do it all the time. There's no way to avoid that. But we can avoid expressing those negative or bad judgments about people based upon what we witnessed or heard them say. careful about expressing your opinions. Solomon says in Proverbs 18:2, fools find no pleasure in understanding, but they delight in airing their own opinions. You know anybody that you would call opinionated? We probably all know somebody who we would say they're very opinionated. What we mean by that is they are free to tell you their opinion about just about anything. They're very opinionated. Solomon says, fools take no pleasure in understanding, but they delight in airing their own opinions. I want to be careful about airing my opinion, lest I fall into the category of a fool. The wise person heeds the familiar instruction, which we have probably said on many occasions. Keep your opinions to yourself. And we like to pull that one out when somebody is telling us something they don't like about us. Well, just keep your opinions to yourself. Pretty good advice, really, in most cases. Keep your opinions to yourself. Here's some good advice. Don't speak until you have heard all of the information. And by that we mean listen to both sides of the story. It's really a good practice on social media, frankly, where we are very quick to air our opinions before we've taken in all the available information. And then to have somebody on social media call us on it and say, well, wait, did you not consider this piece of information? Oh, just how is it I get all that egg off my face now? Maybe that's happened to you. It's happened to me. And I think I've learned my lesson fairly well, although I still find myself tempted to get on the keyboard and express my opinion about this or that. And I catch myself and think, wait, I don't want somebody who has other information to call me on it and make me feel foolish all over social media. So it's wise to wait until you have all available information before you express your opinion. You ever had this happen to you? You're watching a court proceeding, or maybe you're in a court proceeding. You're in the gallery, the audience, and the prosecutor stands up and he questions the defendant, and the prosecuting attorney makes it look like this is an open and shut case. And when the prosecutor is done, you've already made up your mind. This person's guilty. And then what happens? The defense attorney gets his chance to cross-examine. And after he's finished, you find yourself scratching your head thinking, well, I guess it's not as clear as I thought it was after listening to the other side. Now I've heard the second side, and I don't know about this. Proverbs 18:17 says, in a lawsuit, the first to speak seems right, until someone comes forward and cross-examines. Good advice. Now there is a time and place for judging others, but there's never a time or place to judge unfairly. And so we need to heed this advice to hold expressing our opinions until we have all the available facts. Now, this is a good opportunity for us to speak about discretion. I'm skipping down to Proverbs 12:23. Discretion is a good discipline to learn. Basically, it's expressed this way. You don't have to say everything you know. Be discreet. Be wise. Knowing the truth is one thing. Knowing when to speak it and how to speak it is wrapped up in discretion. And we need to be discreet. Proverbs 12:23 says, the prudent, the wise, keep their knowledge to themselves, but a fool's heart blurts out folly or foolishness. I'm always wary of people who talk a lot, or I should say it this way, of people who have an opinion about everything. I mean, a strong opinion about everything. I'm thinking, how is it they know so much? I mean, they know so much. They know everything about everything. And I found out by observing, even on social media, I find myself scrolling past people who are posting stuff all the time. It's like, I don't know what you call it, overload. I didn't plan to say this, but anyway. Maybe you've been there too. A person who has something to say about everything all the time, eventually people just sort of block them out, either unconsciously or consciously. And so we need to choose wisely when to speak and how to speak. Else people won't listen to us. Here's another word of the wise. Don't tell what you promised not to tell. It's another aspect of discretion, namely keeping a confidence. Do not make exceptions to your promise to keep a confidence. We make exceptions to that on the basis that we think we can trust the person to whom we are breaking the confidence. We go up to a person and say, I promised that I wouldn't tell this, but I know I can trust you that you won't tell anybody else and you won't tell anybody who told you this. We break a confidence because we think we can trust the person to whom we're breaking the confidence. But think about the irony of that. The person who told you something in confidence told you in confidence because they could trust you with that information that was to be kept confidential. And then I turn around, having been confided in, and I turn around and I break the confidence under the same principle that I could trust that person not to tell. When I have just done what I expect the other person not to do. Now, there are times when we learn things that we are strongly compelled to tell somebody else for good reason. Those of you who are educators, those who are counselors and preachers. Sometimes we are told things in confidence that we are required by law to tell the authorities. You can think of examples of when those cases might be. A teacher sees a child who is bruised. What are you supposed to do, Kim?
Terminating the reporter.
You have to do that. It's her legal responsibility. And so if somebody tells a teacher, a preacher, a counselor, something like that, in confidence, in a confidential setting, there are times when they must break the confidence. Now, many times we're not going to find ourselves in that kind of situation. Rare would that be. But there are times when maybe we do need to break the confidence. But here's how you do it. You go to the person who confided in you and you ask them to release you from the confidence this instance for this reason. This is what I've learned to do as a preacher, a married preacher. As I have had people confide in me, I try my best at the very first to say, you can trust me with anything, any information you want to tell me. You can trust me to keep it confidential. But if I think my wife needs to know this, I want you to know I reserve the right to tell my wife. If it's of such a nature that it may cause an issue in my relationship with my wife, I do not want to get in that position. So I try at the beginning to give that caveat. I will keep the confidence, but there's one person I reserve the right to tell, and you need to know that before you tell me. Now, if you still want to tell me, fine. But if it's not good for you, then you need to find somebody else to confide in. I will not break trust with my wife. All right, so don't break confidences. Here's the other side of that coin. Don't confide in someone you don't trust. You think that would go without saying, wouldn't you? But a person whom you know to have broken a confidence is not a person in whom you want to confide. A person you know who has spilled the beans is not somebody you want to entrust with any of your beans. Because you know they talk freely, they talk a lot, and they don't practice discretion. Don't confide in that person. Proverbs 20 verse 19 says, a gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. Back to my wariness with people who talk a lot. A person you know cannot keep a confidence with others is not likely to keep the confidence you place in them. And don't become that person whom people cannot trust. Solomon says in Proverbs 25:9, if you take your neighbor to court, do not betray another's confidence. That's a good thing. But, he says, if you do, then the one who hears it may shame you, and the charge against you will stand. Now, the point of all of that is that the news of you breaking the confidence will spread, and people will come to know your reputation as a person with loose lips. A person who can't be trusted. And all it takes is one breach of confidence for trust to be broken. And how long would it take, if ever, to regain the trust? One more word to the wise. We brought it out before, but it deserves repeating. Think before you speak. Proverbs 15:28 says, the heart of the righteous weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes foolishness. Think before you speak. And don't speak everything you think. One person who does this eminently well in my sphere of acquaintance, and you know him too, is Lloyd Pelfrey. He's preached here on numerous occasions. Lloyd Pelfrey is a man, professor at the Bible College, which I found out next year is going to be his last. 65 years in the classroom. 25 of which he served also as president of the college. At any rate, Lloyd Pelfrey is a man who, when asked a question, will not answer immediately. You ask Mr. Pelfrey, I still can't call him Lloyd. You ask Mr. Pelfrey a question, and he pauses, and he looks off, and the wheels are turning. And a few seconds later, you'll get an answer. But he's learned the wisdom of not gushing out foolishness, but taking his time and thinking about the answer and the possible ramifications of his answer. And above everything else, the truthfulness of his answer. The Bible has a lot to say about the tongue, its value, its danger, the wisdom of when to speak, when to keep silent. Mom says it all in that phrase. If you can't think of something nice to say,
Don't say it at all.
don't say it at all. That says it all right there.
Why?
Let your words be, as it were, seasoned with salt, so that it brings healing and it doesn't cut. Well, that's something we need to pray about, isn't it? So let's ask the Lord to bless us with wisdom.